Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Mocha Live. You got my main man, Colborne Bell, founder of the Museum of Crypto Art, on the sticks. I am Max Cohen, the writer here at the Museum of Crypto Art. And today we're going to talk about crypto art. Colborne, how are you today?
Well, it's been intense, man. Yeah, it's been an intense day, but I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. I'm happy to have you here. I'm happy to be here with you.
How you doing today?
I'm excellent. I look forward to our Wednesday conversations.
Nice. Yeah, me too.
So today we're going to talk about crypto art, but specifically we're going to talk about Twitter, social media, and how the politics of social media seep into crypto art. Now, Colborne, you put an addendum on that with a couple of exclamation points. Crypto art is in distress. Why is crypto art in distress?
Look, I think I sit in an interesting position, right? I sit in between like a lot of different people in the space, and I hear it from all over, right? But most of these things are coming like ground up from the artists. There's just a lot of frustration right now. It feels, of course, like, you know, the larger mission that has failed. It feels like the means of which we are communicating, be it Twitter or Instagram or whatever mode people Discord, it all just kind of feels broken. Like everything is broken or breaking or in the process of transforming.
Have you felt this before in your like crypto art experience, or is there something new, kind of groundswell, like a negative groundswell happening right now?
Look, I've never been like a social media person. I've been in like this Twitter thing by having to be in it for this. This is for sure, I think, like the lowest point of the conversation on Twitter, the like access to opinion, like the innovation, the things that are being uplifted. This definitely feels like a low in that regard. I gave up on Discord pretty long ago as far as trying to be there active daily everywhere. So, and I don't do Instagram. So
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. So I very quickly after I came into the space realized how much of it was basically taking place on Twitter, and almost the bulk of it was happening on Twitter. You know, we see discords, especially like individual artist discords. We see some Instagram usage, but for the most part, right, if not the aesthetics and the conversation is happening on Twitter. And I wrote about this over the summer for NFT Now, which involved talking to Robness about kind of how crypto art came to Twitter. And it made a lot of sense when he was explaining it to me, right? These initial people who were getting involved in early NFTs and early crypto art and pioneering crypto art, they loved crypto, right? And where the crypto conversation was taking place, where Vitalik had decided to take the Ethereum conversation, was Twitter. So everything just kind of glommed on here.
I mean, Jack Dorsey was the only person that was supportive of cryptocurrency, period.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it felt like it naturally just like a very good fit and place to be for that community. Also because it was in responsive, like real time. There was something about the algorithm that was very favorable to the events as they were unfolding. It was a great place to keep track of like news and events.
Yeah, what was it? I think 2019 when Facebook and Instagram both banned ads from crypto companies.
Yeah,
which
it would have been like 18, 19 after everybody made all the money off the ICO boom anyway. So it's just like too little too late.
But yeah, I mean, I think we see very obviously the aesthetics of Twitter have entered the aesthetics of crypto art. And by that, I mean, you know, Twitter is kind of batshit crazy. It's kind of all over the place. There's this like endless war of opinions and topics and fighting for attention. And I think that crypto art so kind of beautifully captures that massive like miasma of just information, but you know, with no specific source to no specific end. It's all just out there. And I think that's wonderful. But I guess just before we get into anything else, like why do you think Twitter has been like an erosive force against crypto art? Or do you even think that that's true?
I mean, double-edged sword always, right? It like demands your engagement, your attention, but is that really, how to go about creating well-intentioned, deep, thoughtful art?
Mhm.
So everybody is constantly split. I think it goes back to the aesthetic that you're describing of like this chaotic, frenetic, like it's it's a place where people generally like approach things kind of like head on and angry, and it does kind of become like very at times, I don't know, confrontational and aggressive. So it is an interesting venue to begin to discuss anything like artistic. It seems, at some point it favored sales, it favored like low quality engagement farming. It it catered to a bunch of people that knew how to game it, and didn't really care for people that were trying to have those discussions or any sort of like collective thoughtful, um, right?
Yeah.
It was the GM effect, right? Let's just like
Uh-huh.
reduce everything to like its most base bubblegum like candy culture, and let's like
Mhm.
export that as something that's
Well,
meaningful.
well, I think that that's the natural result, right? When you're working, when the space exists on a platform that is exclusively ruled by this, I don't know, subterranean algorithm that we don't necessarily understand. We know we're enthralled to, but we can game it as best we can, but we can't control it. What's going to happen is the things that the algorithm enjoys are going to rise to the top, right? I think that's always been there, but in that kind of wonky social algorithm sense, right? Like whatever is capturing the cultural zeitgeist of the moment is essentially appealing to some algorithm. But now that algorithm is, numerical, and it's, controlled by a single entity as opposed to, I guess, more collectively, culturally processed and proposed. But you made a really interesting point earlier that I want to get your thoughts on, and that was the difference between content and art, right? Because we're nominally an art movement, or we like to think of ourselves as an art movement, but at the same time, the channels that we use to expose ourselves to those art or to that art, to sell and buy and look at and exalt that art, all in every other circumstance prioritize content. So, what is the difference there, and how do we navigate? How do we walk that
I
line?
Ever since we like started asking this question, I'm wondering from the beginning if this has always just been a content movement,
Mm.
right? I don't know. I think that's I don't know. That's not really like a question I have an answer to, because then you start to get into your own head about like how much conditioning you've had that already makes you respond to content as art,
Well, I think
right?
this is a larger issue, right? Where I remember, as I've graduated into the adult world as a creative, seeing so much pushback from creatives on, their specific artistic nomenclature being replaced by content creator, and how belittling content creator as a name is. But that's what all of this is, right? And when we, you know, tune into a Netflix shareholders meeting, they're not talking about their programs, they're talking about the content, right? And when
Right.
Variety and the Hollywood Reporter are talking about the streaming wars, they're talking about who has the best content. That word has seeped into everywhere. Do you think there's a difference, or do you
Well,
think that
yeah,
that?
of course, because content creator, it reduces you to, you're beholden to the platform for which you're creating, right? Whether it was Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, like you are at the mercy of that. You are literally just creating content for that platform, right? There was a promise of sovereignty here, right? That like you could have some like existence outside of of deplatforming, right? Like you were suddenly owning your audience because they had the ability to own your work.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I think it is incredibly diminutive to like call it content.
Yeah, it has. I mean, even the word has like odes of, or it stinks of like self satisfaction, right? Content, content. Maybe that's reading too much in the Latin root of the thing.
Yeah, right,
But I
that's
think
right.
that like content as we understand it, whether it's Twitter content or streaming platform content, it's meant to be spread, right, as far as possible, right? How many people can have their eyes on this, right? And I think that it does make sense when these entertainment publications are talking about content, because the goal of all of these streaming services, the goal of most Twitter communication, and I suppose in large part the goal of many artists is for their work to be seen by as many people as possible, full stop, right? But art, in theory, is meant to be internalized, one would think. Maybe I'm too romantic about the thing. But I think about, my own writing, right? Would I rather have 100 people gloss over an article that I write, or would I rather have 2 people really engage with it, really feel changed by it, really have their emotions not toyed with, but affected by it, right? Where's the line between that?
And hasn't this been like, since you've been involved with the museum, like the internal discussion that we've had, right? Like you see so many people doing more things, like appealing to the masses, being more commercial, like it's like incredibly, in my opinion, like so cringe, inauthentic, like, but it works. And that like really confuses me, because it makes me feel like I actually have no idea what this audience is, what they want, or what people are trying to consume.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine like there's a lot of artists. I know for a fact that there's a lot of artists right now like going through internal crises of like, probably they no longer know what their collector wants or what their brand is, because everybody was like so like aggressive in a bull market, and there was just like no control. And now it has to be like so lean and tight, and there's so few collectors, and the people are getting propped, or like so clearly getting manipulated, and it's like, what is left of something that was so like natural and organic?
Yeah. Something I'm very grateful for with the museum is that, we're not reliant on clicks to have a huge like financial output, right? I think of all, most of these sites that are generating content quickly, right? They have to generate as many clicks as possible because they're reliant on the income that comes from, advertising metrics from those clicks, right? And what you get when you're unmarried from that is the ability to explore, the ability to play, the ability to be really creative in a way that isn't, you know, uh, appealing to the search engine algorithm. I mean, every time I meet a writer out into the world, they're generally, search engine optimization writers, right? Which is wonderful. And I will never, chagrin anyone for the hustle, but it's deeply unsatisfying to me, as I imagine it's deeply unsatisfying to them. I think it's really interesting, right? If we take that paradigm and just shift it to artists themselves, right? As an individual, when you're responsible for your income with your art, if that's first and foremost your priority, well, we can say all these wonderful things about everyone having their individual style, but you're kind of forced to chase the zeitgeist, right? Unless you have one of these patrons that is always going to be there for your work. And it's not until you've captured the zeitgeist that you can then do the experimentation.
I mean, imagine how like infuriating it must be for an artist who has like worked for years to develop their own style, their unique thing, and like, what do they see selling is like X copy derivatives, Grant Yoon derivatives, like derivatives of derivatives, and
Mm.
it goes all the way down. And that for me is it's pretty frightening. And what's even crazier is how quickly so many other people are to like jump in behind a commercially successful artist style.
Mm-hmm.
And it speaks to
Definitely.
just that ability to like proliferate and spread that art as content. So like, whereas perhaps the original had some real like intention and thought and depth and like a statement and clarity, then the visual aesthetic just gets repackaged and resold way down the line. I mean, Anubis was telling us about the person who I guess just kind of like took an X copy and minted it, or did an
Mm-hmm.
unofficial X copy collab because it was CCO, and then everybody got mad because it was an unofficial collab, but they minted like hundreds of open editions. And like, this is the end goal. This is like the perpetual race to the bottom. And it's,
Sure.
yeah.
I don't. I think that an interesting kind of inoculation to this principle is what I see from groups like CryptoArg, and making it right. That's making it 24/7 in Crypto Argentina, who boast among their ranks, and there are dozens of people in both of these organizations, right? These like artist collectives, and they have within them varying degrees of financial success among individual artists. Um, and I think it's really interesting because they buy each other's work, they support each other, right? There's almost this like kibbutz, we're all in this together, we're all working towards the same goal atmosphere. And it lets the individual artists, especially those who do not have the name recognition of those at the top, be more experimental, be more artistic as opposed to creating content because there's already been the success of those elsewhere in the organization. Um, right? The financial shouldering the financial burden does not come down to the individual. It's spread out amongst a bevy of shoulders of various degrees of wideness. And I think it's very impressive.
Look at that collective mentality has worked time and time again, right? Because once people like find each other, and I guess I can curse here, like when you really fuck with a group of people, right? Like those are your people, like that is also how you kind of beat the algorithm, right? You're not out there alone. You have people supporting your work. You're in shows together. Like if people are at different stages, like it's validation for each other's art as well, and to keep going, and recognition, and those groups, like that is, I think, the original nature of what the thing was, because it was small enough, and then of course it got so big. But like if you knew this person like was into this person, well then like you should be into that too. um
Yeah,
and that's how we as humans draw mental models. So like I would encourage certainly more people to begin to think about like the other artists that you're interested in, how you can rep yourself in like larger ways, how you can each speak to each other. I think that is that is for sure structural. Like I think we're really getting away. We have to try and get away from whatever like the contemporary traditional art world sense of like the ego of the artist as that person in like the standalone thing, into like the body of the collective. I think that's very much like a Web 2 to Web 3 shift.
certainly. And I think, so we've just talked about content versus art, right? We're using these um, kind of two groupings of language, right? The like internet era Web 2 language versus something that's more universal, right? And I do want to shift to talking about another layer of that, which is art world concepts that we've understood for a while, right? Collectors, curators, and now having that abut against something that's also very like algorithmically generated, the idea of influencers, and how blurred the line is between them, right? It seems to be an extension of the same principle, right? You have artists who can't just make art because they're financially reliant on making content, and you have these collectors and curators who, for the same reason, right? Because it's not just enough to collect work. Oftentimes you have to promote it, right? You have to use that work to gain clout because there's financial incentives and sociocultural incentives that go along with making sure that your footprint is as large as possible. So what do you think it says just in general? I mean, what do you think the effects have been of this blurring of the lines between collector slash curator and this influencer model that I think we all think is odious, but we can't totally avoid?
Yeah, we can't escape it because you know uh you you can, like, I can speak to the worst of it for sure. Like I can speak to Crypto 888, and I can speak to Beanie, and how like they came in, they used their money to perpetrate all sorts of things that they wanted to. They were incredibly like inflammatory. um and then over time they got outed. So like default model, mental model in my mind is that like all of these people are running some sort of like long-term extractive scam. Like everybody was very quick to like pick up on the language that was working, and then like LARP as that persona and then eventually pull the rug. It's like, how long is this going to last?
Mhm.
So, you know, I know a lot about like a lot of other people, and you know, the sad truth of the matter is that like a lot of these like late game influencers with a ton of money are really just like sales and marketing, online sales and marketing gurus, right? So gurus. So like what is, like, you know, like you're the Pied Piper of capitalism, and it's
Mhm.
all so backwards because that was exactly what we were trying to get away from. Like, you know, an open decentralized metaverse does not mean like funneling everybody into the metaverse that you're clearly funding.
Sure. So along these lines, so we had Una, a wonderful performance artist, ask this question um, on our initial post about this podcast episode. But she asked, "What do all those identifiers, influencer slash creator slash collector, say not about the person, but the audience they think they're speaking to?" And I think there is a deeply unsettling truth that I'm not sure we've all collectively set upon about just the kind of audience that's here. And I think that a hint at what the audience is denoted in the fact that we still have to talk about what a bad investment art is, right? Because I mean, it's been cried to the heavens by everybody with a platform, right? Don't come here for investing, right? These are not good investments. Art will never be a good investment, especially art that's not of, you know, the upper echelon, quote unquote upper echelon, already like accepted as market making artists, right? These are not um, pieces that are meant to be resold in a lot of cases, especially with the open edition boom that we're seeing. It needs to be said again and again that if you're buying open editions, you should not go into them with the expectation that they're going to sell for a lot in 5 or 10 years, even if the artist hits it big, right? Quote unquote hits it big. So let me just turn that question back to you. And what kind of audience do you think is actually here in the crypto art space? Because I think when I think about like who's watching this video or who would be interfacing with us, it's a lot of artists, it's a lot of curators, but you know, I don't know how many people are here that actually just love art and want to just see a bunch of art and learn about art.
I was having a conversation with Earth Sample last night, and I think they placed it like really good. Like, how weird is it when you strip away the online anonymity, really, that a bunch of generally like younger artists are saying GM to like middle-aged men that are pretending to be like punks or monkeys or like pudgy penguins or like these cartoon characters. Like, it's kind of odd, you know, it like that this is, it's almost like a kiss the ring effect. So
Well, I do want to gently push back on that because I think
please.
that there I'm not sure I vibe necessarily with the predatory insinuations there, because I do think in a space like this, like I love the idea that a middle-aged man can let go of their identity in theory. You know, I don't think it's hiding behind these profile pictures as much as it could be leveraging them to then explore new identities, right? I think it's the same thing that people are unsettled with like furries, where it's like, yeah, furries are kind of weird, but it's also so beautiful that these people are, you know, they feel comfortable in this other skin and they're getting to interact with a class of people in a way of interaction that they wouldn't normally have access to.
The
But I
problem
agree with you.
is that
Yeah.
intention is unknown, right?
Uh-huh.
So like if you don't know if they're acting for good, they probably don't even know. Like, you know, I think everybody, there's just like a lot of role playing and probably like fantasy and ideas of I don't know. The imagination is a powerful thing. It is its own like performative art piece, collective
Mhm.
performative art piece.
So when I was 22, I managed a restaurant up in Boston. I don't know how I got that position, but I had worked there a little bit as a server. So I'm managing this restaurant, right? And we have a general manager. She's 25. couple other managers. They're around my age, 22, 23, a bunch of servers who are all college kids or just out of college. And I remember we had a busy brunch one Saturday, and the place is screaming with people. Everything's falling apart. And I kind of looked around and I realized that we were a bunch of kids playing restaurant, right? Everybody
Yeah.
from the top down was just a kid that was doing the best they could, having the experience that they had. And I feel a lot of times like we're doing the same thing in crypto art, right? It is a bunch of people who have no experience running, influencing, contributing to an art movement. But
Yeah.
that's what we're doing, right? We're running these institutions and,
But that's what all of life is.
Yes, but it feels very palpable here. And I wonder how much of the, I wonder how much activity that seems insidious to us is really just childishness or immaturity or inexperience. I think about these influencers, right? I think I'll say it again. We all have this kind of odious idea of these influencers, but like, I think if you're in this position where suddenly you're looking at this glut of people that are interested in what you say, that you can then maybe not profit off of, but work in conjunction with to make some money, to have some influence. Who knows what you can do with that? Everybody has this wonderful idealized version of themselves. Um, and so I think about, the perspectives of the masked 40 something year old man who is, putting out his ring to be kissed by these younger artists. And it's, perhaps it is insidious in intent. Perhaps it's great in intent, but it all depends on the reading. It all depends on what you do with the power once you have snagged it. And I do think that there's some of these influencers who, I don't know how much they actually.
It's like my general distrust for politicians, like if you crave the power, if you desire to be there, and if you are so like intentional about wanting to be that, then there has to be something wrong.
Uh-huh. Well, let me ask. So, we have this wild environment, right, where you have all these people whose identities are being hidden behind layers, right? The Twitter layer, the profile picture layer, whatever quote unquote characters they're putting on. In 2023, right? This moment, January 25th at 5:28 p.m. EST. How does an artist navigate this environment well versus how do you think they would best navigate like the ideal crypto art sphere that I think you and I are aligned on, that we see but may not actually exist? Like what is the practical difference for the artists?
Do you have an answer to that? I don't anymore. I don't know anymore. Like I really don't. I don't. I keep trying to figure out like who is the collector, right? What actually like I think you can probably count the number of patrons on like this many fingers.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, we it's like you said, it's all ad hoc. We benefit from no infrastructure. I think, I understand. It has to. The only thing I really know for sure is that it has to be slow and steady, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to be so strong-willed and like horse with blinders on that, like yourself, your vision, what you're trying to express, and you're uncompromising in doing that, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like the desire. We've seen too many people go exponential and then there's nowhere to go, mm-hmm. right? There's nowhere left to go because like people plateau in this space, and anybody in the traditional art world will tell you like once you plateau and you stall, like the only place left to go is like straight back down. Mm-hmm. And I think like a lot of people saw a lot of other people's success and we're trying to replicate similar things. And then it's like dilutive. And it just doesn't look good. Right. So, I think like X copy wins because X copy was so steadfast in that thing from the beginning, producing. And I bet right now, like they're sitting at home, probably like a little bit lost because they're king of the mountaintop. But, what if I don't know. You know, the last couple things were like hyper commercial things. They felt like favors to people.
Mhm.
You know, it doesn't. It feels like the original point of the art. Maybe, you know, maybe it was a bit lost, and that's sad.
Well, I think that so much onus is put on artists, right? I think the whole onus of the space is put on artists, right? And there's this invisible contingent of collectors that if you do everything right as an artist, oh, they'll come out of the woodwork. They'll see your hustle, they'll see your grind, and they will bring you to paradise, right? And it's like every cult, you know, you impress the leader and he'll put you on that ship to the, I don't know, planet Zorp, with its coconuts and its water that
Yeah,
tastes like cotton candy.
Infinite ETH.
Regardless, I think that the idea of collecting art is really difficult to justify for a lot of people, and myself included, when there's nothing to do with this art but leave it in the wallet until technology advances to the point that I can display it in my home, right? I would not go at me, right? And Max Cohen, I'm not going to the, Brooklyn flea market up in Dumbo, buying some art piece so I can buying some art piece by who knows, right? Just some flea market stand selling an art piece so I can put it in the basement or put it in the closet, right? And wait for an opportunity to put it on the wall. I'm getting it so I can look at it. I'm getting it so it can go in my living room, right? But we don't have that capability yet with crypto art or NFTs for the most part, right? Outside of these digital environments and these very slapdash and segmented digital environments. So a theoretical collector like me, I'm as beholden to the idea of, an artist's so-called success as anybody. But because a collector like me or a so-called collector like me, I don't has no other choice of what to do with this art other than to keep it in my wallet and know that I have it. Right? Where's my incentive for finding new artists? Right? Because what I really want to say is there needs to be more onus on collectors to go out and look for art, right? It's not just about the artists marketing themselves. It's about the collectors sifting through all this art and finding things that really speak to them and finding things that are wonderful. But then you have to ask the question, well, why am I doing that, right? What is ownership doing for me that simply looking at it doesn't? And we laugh at the idea of the right click saver, but in a large part, you can get what you want out of the art piece without necessarily owning it. If you're not interested in clout, if you're not interested in, the investment, right? If you're just interested in looking at the thing. Before NFTs, I would do the same thing with any picture I saw on the internet. I would right click, I would save, I would put it as my phone background or my computer background so I can look at it. And I think we are in this very weird time for crypto art where everything seems to be all these different facets, right? The technology, the collectorship, the aesthetics, they all seem to be now moving apart in their own like evolutionary pathways.
Hmm.
I think it makes it very weird to sit at this intersection and say, well, the art is there, but the collectorship isn't. The collectorship maybe
Hmm.
isn't because the technology isn't advancing in the way that we need it to. Um, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's all chicken and egg, right? I think what you
Yeah.
said was actually really, really fascinating. Because in the beginning, what we were was like pretty much a niche VR community,
Uh-huh.
right? And we were having these like artistic experiences together in VR. I must have onboarded like 20 people in the beginning of the museum into VR just because they wanted to see the museum.
Mhm.
And frankly, like that is an experience worth having. Once and as quickly as it did was mind-blowing. Once that immersive experience gets reduced to a thumbnail image of
Mhm.
which you're building brand around, like that is when it was just an incredible reduction. But you always have to reduce for accessibility, right? So
Mhm.
then there's like this massive amount of onboarding, people buying all sorts of things, nobody knowing, like some people making money telling their friends, like frenzy, like chicken to alligator frenzy.
Yeah.
And here we are in the dust, in the aftermath. And some people got fed, most people are still like hungry, some people are looking around like wondering what happened. And I don't have answers for anybody other than like you got to just stick around and find out and kind of know exactly what it is that you want. I think some of the most successful people have always been like the most upfront, transparent, and authentic people that are like
Mhm.
really in this for the experiment and describing all of their steps along the way. I know you just did that like article on Claire Silver. I think that's a perfect example of somebody that uh, was really, really honest and transparent. And you know, when we consider what it means to be like, you know, a collector as influencer or somebody that is, you know, influencing because they are honest, authentic, and like deserve an audience, well, we're looking at like two totally different spectrums.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting what were saying about these virtual experiences. You know, I think that that's one of the reasons I believe in the quote unquote metaverse. I think that's one of the reasons that Mocha is so aligned with the metaverse. I think it's one of the reasons we've put so much time and resources into rooms, because we believe in the ability of these virtual environments to give a reason for crypto arts being. Um, and I do think that it's inevitable that people are. I don't think crypto art's inevitable. I think that we're here, and that the community here is so powerful, or at least interested in maintaining itself, is kind of a miracle. But virtual worlds, I think, are inevitable, and people will spend more time in them, and it will give a reason for ownership of these, you know, art pieces, that you'll be able to display them in these spaces. You know, one of my favorite artists is Natural Warp, who creates these incredible like spherical works. I mean, he does all sorts of incredible things, but one of the things that he does is creates these incredible like spherical overlays, right? And you step inside and you're in this incredible fractaled environment, and it's completely impossible to feel a connection to that art unless you are in VR goggles walking through this space, right? As I think is the case with a lot of these objects. Um, Claire Volstadt is, I think, one of the greatest 3D sculptors we have, but it's impossible, or at least very difficult, to fully appreciate her art and these sculptures that she creates unless you're looking at them in a virtual environment in which they're huge and in front of you, and you're walking around them and you're interrogating them. When you're just dragging and dropping them with your clicker finger, as I think is how we must experience them when Twitter is the place where we spend most of our time, I think it's very hard to appreciate the artistry. Um, I think it's very, very hard to appreciate the artistry. And in place of that, we have name, and we place importance, admiration that should be coming from the art. We instead connect it to the names, because that's what Twitter puts before us in boldface, is somebody's name. And then, you know, whatever they have in their thumbnail tweet, if we choose to expand on it.
I think the whole thing was very absurdist, right? Like, what is the point of digital ownership when you can right click save, right? That's
Mhm.
that's the core of the question. It was like an absurdist play that just happened in real time. And I don't know what it means to own a digital object when there is infinite reproducibility, other than that it's just like, of course, like the next natural extension of capitalism to go into what are like abundant spaces and begin to try and divide them up. And of course, like, because we can do it, we did it.
Mhm.
But to me, it always felt a bit like a funny joke played on the world, but then it like really, really got out of hand.
Levity. We're missing levity, I think, in a lot of places. We're missing the ridiculousness of the space.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
one
look,
thing.
I mean, I think that's why Beeple was so successful, right? And that's why Beeple ended up being the face of this. But again, like, capital eats a person like that. Like, that is probably, you know, somebody who is very playful and amusing and curious. But that person ends up getting like co-opted for a million different things.
Mhm.
Um, which again is part of like associating your public persona to the art, is that once you are like known, then you are influenced, and it really doesn't matter like how much money you, of course, like even like Elon Musk is out there playing Twitter persona and not like richest man in the world. So
Well, I think to connect that outside of crypto art, like everybody's favorite, 80s, 90s artists, Basquiat, right? There was a dude who was super aware, super aware. He was
yeah,
forced to be aware of his place in the artistic canon and how successful he was. And he would sit in his Soho apartment, on his penthouse apartment, you know, getting wasted and making this incredible art. And a bunch of yuppies would come by. They'd place $1 million bids on that art. And what choice did this guy have but to continue making it? And I think it killed him. I mean, I'm not going to say
for
this
sure.
or that killed him, but there's no way it didn't contribute to that, right? The awareness of his position. I mean, you make these people, we make people shooting stars, and then we get surprised when they crash. It's like we're throwing you real high up there, and I'm not sure anybody has actually survived that fall, no matter how we may romanticize the Warhols and the Dalis and the Pollocks. I mean, a lot of these people were deeply, deeply unhappy. I mean, I think for me, the most prescient example is David Foster Wallace. And as a writer, I've always emulated, or as a writer, I always emulated David Foster Wallace, this genius who writes these incredibly long, complex, big books full of ideas, and they're funny and they're interesting. And that guy at 40 was, he had everything that I've ever wanted for myself, right? He had the clout, he had the critical success, he had the audience. He could have done anything, anywhere for anybody, and they would have paid him out the wazoo to do it. And he battled some demons. He hung himself in 2010. And, that kind of superstardom that we all dream for ourselves is just not sustaining, right? Because you keep having more demanded of you. I think Twitter does that. I don't think we came. No. I think it's on. I know, but I think it's on brand. I think Twitter does do that, right?
Yeah.
With your follower count, right? I have 50 followers. That's awesome. I have 100. I have 500. I have 800. And I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that every time I opened Twitter, I didn't check to see if I had gained or lost some followers, right?
Yeah.
It's always a number. Doesn't matter if you gain 1,000 overnight, right? Double your Twitter follower count. Always more. There's always a larger audience. I bet Cristiano Ronaldo with his 70 million followers still, it's like, oh, how can I make that 90?
I mean, that speaks to just like the core. There is something very core, fundamental about like number go up, right?
Yeah.
Like more. Like we just have this in our nature. Again, I don't know if it is like human nature or if it is just like capitalistic programming because we won, but everybody wants more, and it's just not sustainable. And frankly, there's no way to even begin to rewire that desire. Because if you do less, then somebody's just going to do more. And I don't know, man.
So let me ask you a last question, right? Are there salves for this that are available to us that aren't spiritual? Or does it just come down to, every artist needs to just become spiritually okay with putting out work that may not sell?
Yeah. I would say like disconnect yourself from the economics and just create. Right, as much as possible. That's where I see the greatest amount of concern is people like caring about supply or caring about should they do this or should they follow this like trend. Like again, nobody is going to have the answer. So crowdsourcing information is never going to give you a good answer. You just have to do like what is in your heart and is good for you.
Yeah.
And if you can go back and justify it and say like, I did an open edition because I wanted more people to access my work at a lower price point, and you believe that, and you believe that is good for you, and you believe it is good for people, and you like kind of exist in a do no harm, but that this is all just one big, great experiment, then that's great. Yeah.
I think it's important we remember that just because Twitter is where we are doesn't mean Twitter is where we should be, where we need to be, or that it's our friend. I want to stress that.
Yeah. But where people are listening to us, it's Twitter. So like,
yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I spend all my time on Twitter and I hate myself for it. I think you have to live that double-edged sword. I just think we need something, I think we can't just stay on Twitter. Yeah, we need to have IRL events. We need to have artist communities. We need to have Discords. We need to have Twitter as a part of the thing, but not all of it, right? And not just moving ourselves to another social media site and saying, well, maybe this is where things will change. We need this suite of differing areas where we can be different people, where we can put on different facets of ourselves. We can exalt different parts of this movement, whether that's in the metaverse, whether it's on social media, whether it's in none of those places.
It all corrupts absolutely, right? Like great things start in small places, and the bigger they get, the worse they get. So
ain't that the truth? Well, Colborn, let's leave it there with a little food for thought for everyone. Let me just ask you one thing.
Positive note.
Who you got for this weekend?
You know, I missed my parlay by one. Who did I miss? I missed I called, it was the last game. I picked the Cowboys over the Niners.
Silly.
Yeah. So who do we have? We have KC in Cincinnati.
KC Cincinnati in Kansas City.
I have to go with the Bungles again.
Wow, Jolton Joe Burrow has swayed you.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of him too. I so respect they who can talk a lot of shit and back it up.
And then it's Niners Eagles.
Niners Eagles.
Wow. All right. I'm gonna, God, I have to go with the Eagles.
Yeah, you got to think about the city, right? Who's got the bigger balls as a city? It's definitely Philadelphia.
They definitely have the bigger balls. I generally don't make my sports bet on size of the balls of the city, but
maybe that's why you're losing your parlays.
Exactly. Exactly. Maybe I should from now on.
Well, excellent. Coborn, thank you so much for being here.
Cheers,
to all our listeners,
pleasure.
Watchers, thank you all for spending some time with us. And we will be back here. Same bad place, same bad channel next week at 5.